Madam, please begin. We are live. Nilima, madam, please start.
Good morning, all of you. Good morning, Rajendra sir.
Good morning.
Myself, Nilima Vasa, Assistant Professor, College of Nursing. So, as we know, we are listening a webinar on researching nursing. So, for that, we have our today's honorable guest, Dr. Rajendra, Assistant College of Nursing, Loni, Maharashtra. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, madam.
Firstly, let me introduce to our honorable guest. Sir, yes, let me introduce. Sir was graduate in the 2004 from the Maharashtra University of Health and Science and postgraduate as SSC College of Nursing Science in Mangalore, Rajiv Gandhi University of Health and Science in Karnataka 2009 and also doctorate degree in PhD at Pravra Institute of Medical Science in 2021. Sir has total 16 years of experience in academic and clinical areas in various positions. And also, Sir has published 14 research articles in index, in peer review, and national and international journals. Sir has also presented 13 scientific papers in the various conferences and workshops and also guided a 10 PG dissertation. And also, Sir has the organizer and presenter for the many national and international conferences, workshops, and CNE, and also attended the international, national, and the regional and the, conferences and CNE. And also, Sir is affiliated with the professional bodies and activities involved in number of universities across the Maharashtra, Kerala, Gujarat, Karnataka for the curricular and education. So, also serve as a member of PIMS Institutional Committee and also work as a professor and IT coordinator in Sindhudai Eknath Vikhe Patil College of Nursing, Loni, Maharashtra. And Sir is also recipient of the Best Honors and Award as the Best MSc Nursing Science student SSC Nursing College of Mangalore and Karnataka, and also Best Paper Presenter and the international level of 2021 at Pali University, and also poster presented in 2014 in CIMS, Loni, Maharashtra. Sir was the recipient and also licensed plain in Faculty of Exchange Program and visited the University of Stockholm, Sweden in 2014. So welcome you, sir. So now, without wasting your time, I hand over the session to Sir for the continuation for sampling methods in research methods. Over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nilima. So before we begin with the our session, sampling methods in research, I acknowledge the management of Pravra Institute of Medical Sciences, who permitted me to present a topic on sampling methods in research. I must acknowledge the Parul University and the management of Parul University. I must say thanks to Dr. Ravindra Echen, the principal and professor of Parul University, Institute of Nursing Education, and our alumni, Mr. Swapnil Rahane. So we'll begin with the sampling methods in research. Why these sampling methods are important in the nursing research. The learning objectives of today's webinar is the participants should know the different terminologies, enumerate the steps of sampling process, understand the sampling methods and its applications in research, and differentiate the probability and non-probability sampling methods. The sampling is a process of selection of sample from the available populations, the entire set of populations. The selection of sample is an important step in research process, and the results are validated and generalized based on the sampling methods and the procedures. The selection of sample depends upon the type of study, whether it's an experimental study or the descriptive study. Based on that, we can have the sampling methods, availability of the sample, the geographical area or the accessible populations, the cost, the economical constraints, logistic resources, and the time availability. So how much time the study will take. So these things which we have to keep in our minds. The probability simple random sampling is preferred method for any research. Usually we use this probability method of sampling in the experimental research. However, the non-probability sampling is used in the qualitative type of research studies. Common terms which we use. Population is the total membership of a group or objects in a stage or a geographical locations. So entire populations, all individuals which we consider as a populations. Sample, it refers to the small section of the populations which is selected and from whom the data is collected in a research. That's our sample size. The sampling is the process of selecting subjects who are representative of populations. So it means that the accessible populations, we can have the example that is the target populations. We consider the diabetes mellitus patients is our target populations, but the sampling or the accessible population is the diabetic patients who are admitted in the particular setups of the particular ward. We can have the male medical or the female medical wards. Some important concepts in the sampling, that's a sampling unit. The unit of selection in the sampling process is the sampling units. For example, a person, a households, a village is your sampling units where actually you want to do the study. The sampling frame is a set of all sampling units that compose the study populations from which the sample is to be picked. For example, a list of villages, all villages. If I took a Rahata Taluka, so I can select all the villages of Rahata Taluka. A list of all mothers. Sample size is the number of individuals or observations in the sample. Here within in the pictures, the sampling, the outermost box, which covers the target populations. As I earlier said, the diabetes mellitus patients are our target populations. Sampling populations, the diabetic mellitus patients who are admitted in the male medical and the female medical wards, only selected as a sampling populations. Sample, out of which the particular group of people which we have selected as a samples. So target populations, who do you want to generalize to? And study populations, what populations can you get access to? Why sampling? Why is it important? Because it's important to have the less time, because we have to have the time constraints when we conduct a research. If you have appropriate sampling methods, we can save the times. So it takes less time. It reduces the cost of the research. Will give the greater accuracy of the results, because the representation of the results, representations of data findings can have the greater accuracies, will have the greater scope in the publications. If the population is too large or hypothetical, easily with the appropriate sampling methods, we can conduct a research study. Purposes of sampling are the population is too large or the scattered. So that's why the sampling is important. It offers high degree of accuracy. The representation is accurate. The result of the data representation is perfect. Then will have the high degree of accuracy in the results. Results can be obtained shortly. So quickly we can have the results in our hands if we have appropriate sampling methods. Commonly used in the surveys type of research. It needs small portions and economical ones. So cost of the research can be saved with the appropriate sampling. This is the flowcharts of the sampling process, which indicates define the target populations. As I earlier said, the target populations, the general populations and the target populations. General populations is all the areas, all the individuals who are located in the particular geographical areas. But the target population is the selected populations, selected disease, selected geographical area where the common comorbid cases are common. So that's your target populations. Selecting the sampling frame, determine the sampling methods, which sampling methods you want to use. If you have the experimental type of research, then you can go for the probabilities. If you have the descriptive type or the qualitative type, so definitely you can just have go for the non-probabilities. Plan for the selecting sampling units, the set of all samplings which we have to take it. Determine the sample size, whether the sample size is small or the sample size is large. So that we have to determine, and actual sampling units. Based on that, you can have your research work ahead. So conduct a field work. Type of sampling is important of our today's topics. Probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Where the probability sampling, we have the simple random, stratified random, systematic random sampling, cluster sampling, multi-phase sampling, and multi-stage sampling methods. In non-probability sampling, we have the purposive, convenient, quota sampling, snowball sampling, accidental sampling methods, and sequential sampling methods. We can have the detail of all these probability and non-probability samplings. Probability sampling is a scientific method of sampling. Sampling methods where every members of the population has a greater chance of being selected as a samples, because this probability sampling give the opportunity of each and every sample to become a part of research. Where we have the first simple random sampling, every member or elements of the population has an equal chance of being selected. Identify each members of populations by listing with the name or numbers, which gives the selection of samples through any of table of random numbers, or we can use a lottery methods of selecting a simple random samplings. All samples will be considered and all are getting an equal chance. You can just have the commonly used random tables, which will be given by the Tippets in 1927, random numbers table, Fishers and Yates in 1938, Rand Corporation's 1953. Here you can just have the random is the table which gives the random selection of samples, which with the red colors 13, 16, 22, 29, 35, 43. So any samples randomly we can select. Stratified random sampling. It is used when the population is diverse. The researcher starts by subdividing the populations into homogeneous subgroups or in strata, which is based on unifying qualities like your class, your age, the gender, the religions, etc. Because stratified random sampling is only conducted when the populations will be non-homogeneous. Then draw a sample by using simple random or systematic sampling methods. The size of the sample from each strata can be proportionate or disproportionate. Here you can just have the stratified sampling, where in the picture 1 shows that the woman and second is the males. So where we have selected the first, second we dropped, and third and fourth. Again in main, first, second we have dropped, third, fourth. So stratifiedly we can have the selection of samples. Systematic sampling. This sampling is obtaining collection of elements by drawing every kth person from the predetermined list of persons. The selected every kth person until the sample size required to reach. It is most convenient techniques for community labor or clinical based studies. The first sample drawn randomly. So here we have highlighted the example k is equal to capital N by N. So k is nothing but your sample interval. N is your total populations and small n is your sample size. If you have the example of this, the populations of size n is 1000, draw a systematic sample size n 100. So out of 1000 total populations, we have to take 100 number as our sample size. So 1 to thousands. So k is equal to 1000 divided by 100 is equal to 10. So every 10 samples which we have to consider. So 1 to 10 is equal to 3. That is R is equal to random samples. So we have considered third. So first we can take R as a third, then R plus 1K, that is 13, 23, 33, 43, 53, 63, 73 in a range of 10. So sample interval, we have 10. So we can have the systematically every 10th sample we have to enroll for the study. So ultimately out of 1000, we can have the 100 samples. Here you can just have the view on the systematic sampling. Cluster sampling. The smallest, it's a smallest units of populations and is elements and a group of elements are called as clusters. The small groups or small areas which we can take together as a cluster. Cluster sampling implies drawing random sample either from all clusters or selected clusters. Clusters are internally heterogeneous. So we can have the combinations of all. So maybe their class, there may be age, there may be gender, there be their religions. So heterogeneous. All kinds of classes can be clubbed together. Example of clusters are wards, villages of the particular talukas, slums, and the schools. So certain schools which we can take it together, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and club them as a cluster. Here in the picture, you can just see that this is the total populations and from which we want to take only particular group, particular cluster. That's cluster 1, cluster 2. So similarly, we can select as a cluster. Multi-stage sampling, where the sampling is selected in various stages, but only the last sample of subjects is studied. This is the what we can say that the phenomena of this multi-stage samplings. Only the last sample is selected as a subject of the study. The stages of random selection is at primary, and intermediate, and final units. Investigations is restricted to small numbers of units, which represents the whole. For example, studying the panchayat system in village. Here in the national levels, we can have the various states which represents the country. Ultimately, similar to that, districts which represents your states, villages which represents your talukas, and talukas represents your districts. So similarly, we can have this 1, 4, 16, 64, again 256 in multiplications of 4. So that is your multi-stage sampling methods. Multi-phase sampling, where in this method, the part of information is collected from whole samples. So total populations will be considered, and the part of information is from subsamples. Here, each sample is adequately studied before another sample and is drawn from it. We can have the example of TB survey, where the phase 1, because a multi-phase, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and that's why it's called as a multi-phase sampling. Whereas in the TB survey, the phase 1, we used to go for test, Mantoff test, usually done for all the cases. Where in the second stage, those who are positive are screened for the next step, that's for X-ray. And third stage or the third phase is those who are positive with their test, as well as X-ray shows the variations, their sputum is examined. So that's why it's called as a multi-phase samplings in first, second, third, and the particular or the perfect sample will be drawn from these methods. So those who need sputum exam will be small. Probability. So next is the advantages and disadvantages of this sampling methods, which we have seen: the simple, random, stratified, cluster samplings, multi-stage, multi-phase samplings. Why this sampling, probability samplings is important and will have the advantages as well as some of the disadvantages, merits and demerits. In advantages, we have the scientific methods, because this probability sampling is the scientifically proved and it's considered as a scientific methods, which gives the more representations of your results, will have the greater accuracy as compared to non-probabilities, more economical. So we reduce the cost of with this probability, though it's a time consuming, but still it requires a planning. So, but finally, ultimately, it's economically cheap. Next is the disadvantages of probability samplings. It needs a complete list of populations, because if you don't have the list of populations, it's difficult to conduct. So that's why I said it needs a planning. It's a perfect. Difficulty in stratifications. The stratification is very difficult, because the stratified random sampling, where we consider the heterogeneous group, and that sampling is used when the non-homogeneous group will be considered. If the sample size is small, no true representations will be found. And as rightly said, it is a time consumer. It takes more time to complete the research, but this gives the accuracy in the results. And that's why most of the times the researchers prefer this probability sampling methods as their part of research. Next method is the non-probability sampling methods. It's a non-scientific methods. Every member of the population is not given a chance to be a part of sample. Whereas in probability, equal chance to all the samples, but this restricts the non-probability sampling. The choice is usually depends on the judgment of the research. The first type, which comes under non-probability sampling, is the judgment samplings. Is a purposive or deliberate sampling methods. Always we prefer sampling as a purposive sampling under non-probability. It is based on the judgment of the person interested with the jobs. For example, we can have to study the lived experiences of the MI patients, and we observe only the MI cases who are admitted in the particular setups, and we take an interview of those cases and they share their experiences related to their illness. So with the judgments, with the purpose. Quota samplings. This is the stratified sampling minus randomizations, because randomizations will not be considered. The findings of 10 patients from each ward, or we can have the nursing interventions on any topics. For example, assessing the effectiveness of nursing interventions on prevention of anemia among the students. And we can take a certain sample size, maybe like we consider the 120 samples. And we can have the group of samples from first year, second year, third year, fourth year, 30 each. And we can have the combine of all 120 samples. So collection of the samples, collection of data from all the areas. And that's why the finding of 10 patients from each wards. If you have the 5 wards, we can have the sample size 50, 10 from each. So that is the quota samplings with the randomization is minus. Convenience samplings, this is more popular, most of the times the researcher use this convenience sampling as a non-probability sampling methods. The researcher studies all those persons who are most conveniently available and accessible to them, because this take a very short times and complete a study on times. Example, we can have the assessing the prevalence of diabetic cases among elderly populations who are residing in this particular specific village. If the researcher are staying in the particular village, the researcher may give the preference to that particular village, particular area, because it's convenient for the researcher to get the data, to collect the information from the elderly. And that's why it's considered as a convenience. Accidental sampling. It's the incidental sampling methods. Incidentally, nothing we have planned, but incidentally we thought that we can go for research. For example, we can take any example. We went for certain events where we found that certain group of people are similar. So just we want to check their level of health, or maybe their health status. For assessing, here we can have the example of assessing the risk factors among any age group of people suddenly. So particular group of people we can take, suppose the people who are above 18 years of age, which we found in the certain events. So immediately we can collect the information. So accidentally. Sequential sampling methods. It's the consecutive sampling in another terms. The number of samples are drawn one after another from the populations, where we can have the example for assessing the effectiveness of massage on sleep quality among cancer patients. So continuously we can have the assessment of the patients in sequence, one after another. And that's why this effectiveness of massage on sleep, of quality of among cancer patients, will be assessed with the sequential methods. Other research can be conducted with the use of sequential sampling. This is just the example of massage on sleep quality. Snowball sampling is in continuations. It's also known as a network or a chain sampling in continuations. One is connected, ask that person to connect with the others. Initial samples are selected by probability methods, which is followed by additional samples are obtained by referral from initial respondents. It is very useful in locating rare cases. We can have the example of assessment of physical and psychiatric morbidity among chronic alcoholic patients, where we can have, because in this research studies, the researchers selected one chronic alcoholic person and asking him to identify or show other people who are with the similar problems and their availability for the enrollment in the study. It is called as referral, and this is carried out till we get the determined sample size. And that's why this snowball sampling method is also equally important in the non-probability samplings. Non-probability samplings, there are certain merits and demerits, advantages, disadvantages. It's easy to obtain the sample because convenient, purposefully, judgmental, code. So easily we can go and easily we can collect the informations from the people. So easy to obtain the samples. Is effective in testing the instruments in any settings. It is used in the qualitative studies, as I said earlier. It saves the time, your money, economically constraints. It requires less efforts because it's as per our convenience, as purpose. It helps in studying your social issues. Disadvantages of this non-probability methods. It's a difficulty to generalize the results because the true representation is difficult from these methods. Whereas in probability sampling methods, the representation is perfect. The accuracy of result is more than your non-probability methods. No representativeness. There may be a chances of sampling errors, type 1, type 2 errors mainly occurs with this non-probability methods, which is not useful for the larger populations. The small sample size can be determined with this non-probability sampling methods. But if you have the largest populations, you can go for the probability sampling methods. So these are the some of the disadvantages and advantages of non-probability sampling methods. Difference between probability and non-probability sampling. What is the exact difference between these two sampling methods and why we have to prefer the sampling methods as a probability or either non-probability? So probability sampling methods and non-probability sampling, where the probability sampling gives every sample of the population has an equal chance to be a part of research. Whereas in non-probability sampling, every sample do not have a chance as they are selected arbitrarily. In probability sampling, samples are true representations and the results are accurate. Whereas in non-probability, sample are not true representations because the accuracy of result is very minimal. In probability sampling is commonly used in the experimental type of research, whereas the non-probability sampling will be used in the qualitative type of research, usually the mixed type of research studies which we can consider here. The results are obtained are conclusively and unbiased in the probability ones, whereas in non-probability samplings, the results are explorative and there is a chance of bias. In probability sampling, it's a little bit costly, which requires planning and executions. Because when we go for research, we have to see the economical also. If you have a perfection in planning, definitely your study becomes more valid, will show the more representations. Whereas in non-probability sampling, which gives the results quick, is inexpensive, the cost is very minimal, and you can have the convenience. So you can conveniently take samples. So that's why this sampling methods are important. So probability and non-probability samplings. Finally, coming to the end of the topics, that is conclusions. Research itself is a problem-oriented activity to find the answer for certain questions. Similarly, in sampling process, also numerous technical and practical problems are present. Hence, if the researchers select the proper sampling methods in any research, it helps to reduce the time, cost, and bring a true representations and accurate results in the research studies. So with this, I thanks to Nilima. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the wonderful and very informative.
Because so many things are there
Different.
on the sampling methods. Yeah, Nilima, yeah.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Yeah. Session is open. So participant can ask the question in live session. We will wait for the minute. Okay,
Yes.
is that. So the participation can ask the question in live.
Because our research is totally depends on your sampling methods. If your sampling methods is wrong, then the research findings, the representations which we want to take out from our research will go in another directions. So that's why the sampling probability and non-probability.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Madam Nilima.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Now I conclude the session. Okay, now the session on the behalf of Parallel University, I would like to thank you, sir, for the accepting our invitations, for the sharing various ideas regarding the sampling technique. Also, you're sparing your valuable and sharing a knowledge. So I'm sure that after the session, everybody will get and to the knowledge about the sampling method. So thank you, Dr. Ravi, sir, for giving us the opportunity.
Yes, Nilima. Is there any question? No questions. Okay, can I stop the sharing then? Madam Nilima, can you hear me?
Okay, sir, thank you. Now you can leave, sir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much